Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavatyaptadehaaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Gukarastvandakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Ahamasmi Sadabhami Kadachit Nahamapriyaha Brahmaiva Aham Ahatas Siddham Satchidananda Lakshanam. So we are back to online classes only. I think for the time being, depending on the on-site in-person attendance and all the logistics of moving the furniture, taking the camera, doing that, we thought we would just take a respite for the time being and just resume our online classes. So I think many of you have indicated that the in-person classes are useful for two reasons. Perhaps one of the most important reason is that you focus more on what I'm talking about. So you're not looking at your cell phone for messages. You have a notebook right in front of you and you're focused on the teaching. And the second one is that our question answers, our satsang based on the class is more in-depth. Takes a long, you have enough time to have a dialogue. Those are the two reasons why the in-person classes are important. So given that, I request you again that if you are watching these at home, then you try to simulate at least one of those two, which is to focus on the teaching. I really think that's important, especially in this particular advanced introduction to Vedanta. It is really important to focus on the words, the concepts, the insights that the teaching provides us. So I would urge you to take a notebook and have a pencil and so on, and just set aside these phones and telephones and so on, and just concentrate on the teaching. And as far as the satsang and question answer is concerned, we will have to find some other ways to do it. One thing that I'm considering, we haven't really made any decision on, is to have a Zoom session at the end of the YouTube so we can have a dialogue. And the other one is to have a satsang in person and have maybe once a quarter, once every four months or so. And so we'll have to make a decision on either one of them. So the question answers, and of course you can always question me on email, so that's always there. Okay. So with that, let us begin. Last week, we revised the first four. The fifth one was the revision of all the classes that we've held. So there is a nyaya, there is a niyama, a rule, which is called Simha Avalokana Nyaya. So this is a very interesting thing. If you study the book on Nyayas, just amazing how much insight it has in terms of your ability to absorb, to learn, really useful. I think I have a book somewhere. I've gotten it. I've read it once, and I have put together a few, not put together, but just to remember a few of those that are important. And just this last week, I was reviewing it, and it's called Simha Avalokana Nyaya. So Simha Avalokana Nyaya means that what the lion does is primarily go forward, but every now and then he looks back to make sure everything is okay. So this is called Simha Avalokanam. So very similarly, a recap of the previous lessons is a very important part of going forward. So you have to go forward, of course, new material, new insights, but until you have the reference of where we are at any one time. So one thing I would again urge you is that I remember that when we were studying at PRC, this was something that we all did. When Swamiji's class started at 8 o'clock in the morning, not all of us, but many of the students who were really serious would be found sitting there maybe 20 minutes ahead of time. We finished our breakfast and so on, and then we look at the notes from the previous classes to get ready for Swamiji's new class. I remember this so well. And I urge you to do the same thing. You don't have to take 20 minutes, but you can look at your own notes on the previous classes and then go forward. Anyway, just some thoughts. So let's move forward with some new concepts today. You know, the more I study Vedanta, the more I study the advice from Mahatmas, look at some advanced texts, like for example, Gaudapadacharyaji's Karika is one of those. Then all the Siddhi Granthas, Naishkarmya Siddhi, etc. And also the Vartikas on the Upanishads, Sureshwacharyaji's Vartika on Brihadaranika Upanishad. These are all advanced texts. So if I take a look at those, what I find is that in Vedanta, there are two stages of teaching. So one of them is what you might call introductory Vedanta. You can also call it Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam. So it could be Shravanam. But in the context of what we are going to do today, to view the Vedanta in two stages is very useful. One is, there is a beginning stage of Vedanta, introductory. And then there is the advanced stage of Vedanta. And what I found is that many of these statements of concepts, of insights that were presented by the Shastra, Advaita Vedanta Shastra, not any others, Advaita Vedanta, that Sampradaya, Sadashiva Sammarambham Shankaracharya Madhyama Smadacharya Paryantam. So this teaching, the statements and insights of this teaching that are presented in the introductory section are sometimes negated in the second stage of Vedantic teaching. And it wasn't until I really understood why was I able to really grasp or trying to grasp the very subtle aspect of Vedanta. So here's an example. The example has to do with the creation of the whole universe, Srishti. So the Srishti is a creation. And the beginning stages of the introductory stages of Vedanta presents it as a creation by Ishvara. In the second sutra of the Brahma Sutra, as you know, Janmadhyasya Yataha. So this is the definition, the primary definition of Brahman is one in which Janma means the birth, Sthiti and Laya, all three, Janmadi, Janma Adi Yasya, the beginning means it's all three of them are responsible, they are from Brahman. So that means there is a creation. Throughout the other texts also, Yato va imani bhutani jayante akashat vayoho, birth, creation is all presented. Then in the advanced stage of Vedanta, the texts say, I was talking about the birth and Srishti and creation and so on and so forth. What the Big Bang, the scientists call it Big Bang and so on. It really doesn't happen. So this is what the advanced Vedanta says. There's no real creation. Yeah, but I thought you spent a lot of time teaching me that there is creation. Yes, I know. And if you really study the teachings of the Mahatmas, they will all say that if the Shastra immediately points out there is no creation, it will confuse the beginning student. Confuse it to a point that they would just throw away the book and say, this doesn't. In fact, this is what happens. Many of the Western philosophers, so-called philosophers, they all look at Vedanta and conclude this doesn't make any sense. They might have looked into the more advanced form of Vedanta and said there is no creation. Hey, there is creation happening every second. So this is the evidence, that's the proof. And you are saying there is no creation, how is that possible? So they won't really study it. So Vedanta is very cognizant of the fact that you have to start at a point where a people can grasp it. Then go to the next stage and finally and say, by the way, you know that creation I talked about? It is a pretend creation. Doesn't really happen. Then the examples are brought in. You know, Gandharva Nagari was the classical old definition of the reality. Gandharva Nagari means the Nagari, the town, the city in the clouds. That means there is a very skilled person who hypnotizes people and say, now look at those clouds. Do you see that big cloud taking over that small cloud? It is like an army. You know, those kinds of imagery can be made, very skilled imagery. These days, in the modern days, we don't need the Gandharva Nagari, we see movies. And movies are the old Gandharva Nagari. You project a creation which looks very real. Very real. And in fact, a good movie should move you. Maybe that's how it is named, called movie. It should really move you. If you are going to a movie and you're bored and you start looking at your cell phone and so on, then it is not a good movie. That means you're not really moved by it. But a movie is supposed to move you, your emotions, how you take yourself to be one of the actors and actresses and so on. You put yourself in those positions. That is what movement is. So what it means is that there is a creation, as though there is a creation, but not a real one. It's all a projected creation. This is what Vedanta finally comes. But in the beginning it says there is a creation. Swami Maheshananji had given this example that when a teacher tells a student, you know, this is the next stage of teaching arithmetic. One very first stage of arithmetic is that you have 3 apples right in front of the youngster and say, okay, count it, 1, 2, 3. Got it? Okay. This is what we're doing with our 2-year-old granddaughter. She knows now. She can count and she can do all of that. You can subtract it. You can say, okay, there are 3 apples. Let me take one of the apples away. How many are left? And they might struggle for a while. Really. This is just amazing. And then finally the right answer is 2 are left. So then the next stage is the teacher doesn't have so many apples lying around. So they'll say, okay, pretend that you have 10 apples. So the student might say, I don't see 10 apples. Where are they? Just pretend. Close your eyes. There are 10 apples. Okay, all right, I'll do it with some difficulty. Now take 2 apples away. How many are left? You count and so on and so forth. You say, okay, 8, 6, 7, 8, okay. And you take another 2 away. You take all of them away. Nothing is left. There was no apple to begin with, and there's no apples left over. But in between, you learn some arithmetic. This is exactly what the Vedantic teaching is. At first, you think of it as a creation, and then you take it away. So this lesson we are going to keep in mind as we proceed further on in this class. Oh, I was just reading this. So Swami Akhandananda ji was talking about a dialogue that he witnessed. He was sitting in some satsang with some Mahatmas, and there was this one Shishya that approached a Swami, and the Swami knew him. So he was not a new person. So he was one of the Shishyas, and Shishya approached this Swami and said, Swamiji, I had a terrible experience last night. Swamiji said, really? What happened? He said, Swamiji, just to think about it just makes me cringe. I cannot believe what a terrible experience. So Swamiji said, what happened? So he says, Swamiji, I was holding my child in my arms, and suddenly 3 strong people barged into the front door and forcibly took my child away from me. Swamiji said, really? What did you do? So he says, I tried to run after them and they just beat me back and my child was gone. And I cannot believe my feelings. So Swamiji said, really? So what happened? So where's the situation now? He says, Swamiji, then I woke up and I found that my child is still sitting with me. Swamiji said, wow, that is amazing. So really speaking, this is what exactly the pretend creation is. In fact, we read books. I remember when we were younger, there's a couple of books. There was a English author called Jane Eyre. And so my mom and dad, they were voracious readers, and they would also give us these books to read. And I remember this story, which was very disturbing, where there was a very rich man, and he had lots of property, lots of people as helpers, and so on. And then suddenly, one of the ladies, who was a ladies in waiting for his wife, charmed this man, and he fell in love with her. And very soon she married him, and this guy discarded his old wife, who now became a kind of a homeless person. And this former helper became his new wife. I remember I used to be so disturbed by this. Is that possible to do? Now we find in life that happens quite often. But just the pretend story itself was deeply moving to me. I mean, this is the situation. You don't need to have a real creation to move you. This is what is happening. I am being moved by the so-called creation that I'm facing. And it is not a real creation. It is not a real experience. In fact, it is so fleeting, so unreal, that all I have to do is to get into a dream. And Ishvara makes it very clear. The dream is a very important evidence to prove to you that what you thought was real has gone. So this is why this person, the Shishya, he was very disturbed by his child being snatched away by these robbers, even though the child was sitting right next to him, but because he was dreaming. So this experience is so fleeting, so not there. This is what we will study in more detail. That I must have the Shraddha that this is going to disappear. It is already not there, and one day I will understand that it is not there at all. Asangoha bhayamatma. So, but this Shraddha is very important, because without Shraddha, I cannot really understand this. Swami Akhandananda gives a very beautiful example. Really, that was very telling to me. I don't think any of the other acharyas had presented that to me. Maybe they had, but I wasn't listening. Swami Akhandananda says, how do you know who your father is? How do you know? The only way to know your father are the words of your mother. The mother has to tell you, this is your dad. You have no other way of verifying. So you need to have Shraddha towards the Mata, the mother. Because if you don't have Shraddha, you'll say, oh, she's just lying. That doesn't happen. It could happen, but it doesn't happen generally, most of the time. The mother, there's no reason for her to lie. And so you just have to take her word for it. And if you take her word for it, Shraddha, then your relationship with the father becomes, which is exactly what happens, completely different. So Swami Akhandananda says, in the same way, the Shruti, which is a female gender, Shruti is a female gender, is your Mata. And your Mata says, do you know who you are? Do you know the Pita, the Parameshwara, who is with you? You have an amazing relationship with Ishvara. And you say, really? There's no other way to find out Ishvara except the Shraddha towards the Shruti. Beautiful. What an example. So therefore, when the Shruti says, listen, this is not a real creation. This is a pretend creation, and please have Shraddha. I know it doesn't look like it. I know you're struggling and you have to deal with it and so on. But if you just keep at it, you will understand you are not bound. You are already free. You just don't understand it. That's it. So this is the direction of the Vedanta that we should be aware of. So here, one other example that I was just thinking of. So, the presence of Ishvara, the presence of Brahman, the very truth of Brahman that I am, actually is so obvious, so simple, so truthful, because it is there that if I am not thinking right, I miss it, which is exactly what happens. It is, even though it is very obvious, I miss it. So, there's a very beautiful story given by Swami Dayanandji, which I think I have already told many of you early on, but I'll repeat it here. So it appears that the story of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson in England is quite famous, because Sherlock Holmes was a person who would solve mysteries, murder mysteries, who killed, and so he was an expert. He would be smoking this pipe, and he has this, that's the image that we have, I think, from movies. And there is a P.G. Wodehouse, and so he had created Sherlock Holmes. He was a very iconoclastic, solver of mysteries. And he had an assistant called Dr. Watson, kind of like, Akbar and Birbal. Birbal was the assistant to Akbar. And so Dr. Watson was always with him. So they were always in London. They were cruising around trying to solve murder mysteries and so on. So one day Sherlock Holmes told Dr. Watson, he says, you know what? We have become too much of a city people. I think we need to go and do some hiking outside the city, because we can't even see the stars. There are so many lights. It should be nice to go on hiking and camping, and we'll have a camp far away from London where we can see the bright lights of the stars and so on. So they said, okay, let's go. So they both went to a faraway place, and they found a campground, and they lit a fire and had some wine and ate quite well, and they put up a little tent so they want to sleep because it's cold, and they got into their sleeping bags, and they're so tired and half drunk, they went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Sherlock Holmes wakes up. He looks around and he says, oh my God, I can't believe it. So he tries to wake up Dr. Watson and says, Watson, get up. Dr. Watson is so sleepy. He says, why, what's the problem? He says, wake up, wake up. Something terrible has happened. Don't you see? He says, no, I don't see. He says, what do you see? So he looked up and he says, I see some bright stars. I see the dipper. And then he was of course a very bright person, so he was very well versed in astronomy. And he said, those are those stars, and this is Mars, and so on and so forth. So he would say, what else? Then he says he wants more detail. Then he says, okay, there is the Saptarishi, and so these 7 stars. He says, what else? So finally he says, I don't know what you want. I don't see anything. So Sherlock Holmes turns to him. He says, my God, you fool. Don't you know that our tent has been stolen? In the middle of the night, somebody unhooked their tent and they were still asleep. When they went to bed, there was a tent which prevented them to see the stars. And now in the middle of the night, they're seeing the stars. Dr. Watson says, oh my God, you're right. This is a story Swami Dayanandji was very fond of telling. So he was to say that really all this is what Vedanta says, that it is very obvious, very obvious. So this is exactly what Kena Upanishad says with Pratibodha Viditam Matam. My dear, you cannot miss the Atma. It is right there with you. One very important thing to see here is that so there are three ways of looking Satyam, Sat. Okay? There are many ways of looking at the Sat. We looked at Pratibhasika Sat, Vyavaharika Sat, Paramarthika Sat, Mithya Satyam, all those kinds of things we saw. But here in this case, there are three ways of looking at Sat. And what are those? One is called Pratyaksha, which says, this is what I see. Because my sense of reality is based on what I see, what I taste, what I touch. If I don't feel the touch of the table, I don't know there is a table. If I don't see the camera in front of me, then I don't know there is a camera. So whatever I see is what gives rise to my sense of reality. This is called Pratyaksha. Then there is Paroksha. So Paroksha means that I don't see it, but I know it is there. I know there is New Delhi. I know there is Washington, D.C. I know I don't see President Biden or Prime Minister Modi, but I know they're there. I don't have to keep on looking at them all the time. I could if I would meet them, but I don't have to see them. And in the case of the Vedantic teaching, there is also the Paroksha Ishvara. So that can be an extension of the Paroksha Jnanam, Paroksha Satyam. So the Ishvara is also something which is not there in front of me. But in the words of Vedanta or any other religion for that matter, Islam or Christianity or Judaism, any of the students will say, yes, there is God. It's there. Not in front of me, but it is there. It's called Paroksha Jnana, Paroksha Satyam. So then we have two of them, Pratyaksha and Paroksha. Then there is a third Jnanam, third Satyam, called Aparoksha. This is a very important word. I think we have already talked about this before, but just to reiterate that in this context, this is a very important word because it says It is there, but neither as pratyaksha nor as paroksha. Aparoksha. So the I, you are the aparoksha. You are the aparoksha. Are you pratyaksha? I am not pratyaksha. I don't see myself in front of me. Can you ever be paroksha? That doesn't make any sense. You cannot be paroksha. You cannot go around asking everybody, where am I? Where am I? Nobody asks, where am I? I am. So I'm not paroksha. I'm not pratyaksha. Does that mean I'm not there? This is what the Upanishad says. My God, don't you see? You're the aparoksha. In fact, as we will now pursue this main topic, this is why I've chosen this one verse, Ahamasmi sadabhami kadachit naham apriyaha. That verse. Brahma eva aham atas siddham. There is the proof. So, this is the main topic that we are going to be studying. In fact, you are Sat. You are the Sat. Aparoksha Sat. And it is very interesting. You know, sometimes they say that you are that and that is you. You know, sometimes these kinds of statements are given. You are that and that is you. So here, when we say you are the Sat, you know what it means? Some more words have to be added to clarify that. It means you alone are the Sat. You are the Sat. If you just leave it at that and don't add you alone are the Sat, then it has loose ends. Because you'll say, I am also Sat. Everything else is also Sat. Okay. Then what happens is that your drishti, your vision, turns into a jiva. You feel that, yes, I'm looking at this room and I'm also a person looking at it. Sorry, the room is also Sat, I'm also Sat. And so if that second statement is not given, then I reduce the Paramarthika Sat to Vyavaharika Sat. Doesn't it? Isn't it? Because then I say, things are also Sat, I am also Sat, I am one of the Sats. So the second statement is very important. You alone are the Sat. Nothing else is Sat. And if you don't believe it, just put your own reason to it. Not a question of, here's where Shraddha is not Jnanam. A belief is also not exactly Shraddha, but even if you were to take, for the sake of this, that the belief is a Shraddha, or Shraddha is a belief rather, then the belief is not knowledge. It is a deliverer of knowledge. So this, if you don't have this, the Shraddha has already delivered it. Now you have to work on it on your own mind. I alone am the Sat. How can I alone be the Sat? How can this be true? It goes against the very face of that. But let's look at it. This is what is called Anubhava. I think Swami Akhandananda was very clear about this word Anubhava. Anubhuti, aparoksha Anubhuti, we did that text. This is called Anubhava. What is Anubhava? Anubhava means, the word Anu means to follow. To follow something is the meaning of the prefix Anu. So Anubhava means the way the Shruti says how I bhavati, how I am, I have to follow the words of the Shruti. This is called Anubhava. It is not experience, because I am an experience all the time. But it is the right experience. And the right experience is, I alone am the Sat. Just look at the reason for it. Shruti has already delivered it to you. It's given you the message. But now you have to, so this is where, we say that three filters have to be used: Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhava. So let's apply Yukti on it. How is it that I alone am the Sat? It's very clear if you think about it. Is there anything else that always is? No. Everything else is changing. This is amazing. Even Ishvara is changing. Ishvara is changing means how? Sometimes I think Ishvara is, sometimes I have some doubts. My mind is changing, and my view of the mind is also changing. Everything is changing. My Jagrat Avastha doesn't stay. It is replaced by Swapna Avastha. Swapna Avastha doesn't stay. It is replaced by Sushupti Avastha. My body is aging, my mind is flickering, everything is changing. But I don't change. I alone am Sat, Sat, Sat. And when you say I, we are not talking about you as a jiva, but you as Sat Swarupa. Satyam Jnanam Anantam. Does it ever change? Don't you see you are the Sat? With this insight, look at everything. Ishvara also changes, but the very content of Ishvara, which is Brahman, which is you, doesn't change. So you are really nothing but, in fact, Brahman is you. When you say you, I always look at myself as a jiva, endowed with the body-mind complex. No, I'm not talking about that. You. It is proof. Brahma eva aham atas siddham. This is the proof. It's done. Brahman also is Sat Swarupa. That is me. In fact, my Sat is the total Sat. So this is what we need to work on. This is what we will explain in more detail. This is something unique about Vedanta. Swami Akhandananda has pointed this out, that for you to see that I am a Sakshi is not that difficult. In fact, the entire Yoga Shastra, Kapila Yoga, all culminates it in I am a Sakshi. I am the wit, and so on. Sankhya Shastra culminates that I am in I am a Sakshi. That I am a Sakshi is not that difficult. But you know what the uniqueness of Vedanta is, Advaita Vedanta? This is something we should clearly understand. You know, when you talk about, what do you mean by sampradaya? Samyak pradati iti sampradaya. Something which is, this is what is called the Lakshana of Advaita Vedanta. Something which is unique to Advaita Vedanta. What Advaita Vedanta says is, everybody can say you are the Sakshi, you are the Sakshi, you are the... Not very difficult to do. Close your eyes and you say, don't you see you are the witness to everything? Yes, I can see. Even a 5 or 6 year old can see. But what Vedanta points out is, you are the whole universe. You are the Sat. The whole of the universe is Asat. Nobody points that out. This is the truth of the whole thing. There's no Srishti, no nothing. You are it. You are the only Sat. Don't you see the reason for it? So put your filter, the filter of Sat, filter of Sat. Sat means Trikala abhi abhaditam, which never gets disturbed by anything, unconditionally. Is that possible with anything else except you? No. You are the Sat. This should be obvious. And if it is not, then grow into it. But this is the truth, for whether you understand it or not, it is the truth. So might as well understand it, because the results of this are just mind-boggling. Nothing in the world can compare to the benefits of understanding this. Amritam. You become immortal. Okay, so now we come into the main topic of the class, today's class. This is a very beautiful topic, and I have not seen this presented before. Only when I read this, it just gave me the insight that I might have been lacking. This is related to the initial stages of Vedanta and the advanced stages of Vedanta. So listen to this very carefully. Okay? In the initial stages of Vedanta, introductory stages of Vedanta, I am told, the Atma is different from the Anatma. The seer of something is different from the seen. Drik Drishya Viveka. This is what is talked about. So, Ghatasya Drashta, the seer of a pot, is Ghatasya Bhinna, is different from the pot. Patasya Drashta, Patasya Bhinna. The seer of the cloth is different from the cloth. Okay, so this is the beginning Vedanta. This is what we have been taught all this time. You are different from anything that you see. This is beginning Vedanta. Now comes the advanced Vedanta. This is the Sampradaya of the Advaita Vedanta. It says, whoever sees something can only see something which is not different from itself. The seer, you heard it right. The seer cannot see anything different from itself. This is directly violating the beginning Vedanta. This is where our bhumika, our foundation that we talked about earlier about Shrishti. There is no Shrishti. This is where that bhumika was made for this purpose. This is what we have to now work on. What do you mean the seer cannot see anything which is different from itself. What do you mean by that? How can this be true? To look at the derivation of this, let us go back to the very basis of the Srishti. The very basis of the Srishti, given in the very basic books of Vedanta, such as Tattvabodha, is this. This is Vedanta 101. It says that what you see consists of these 5 basic elements. Pancha Tanmatras, Pancha Mahabhutas. We know that quite well. Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apaha, Prithvi. Space, air, fire, waters, and solidity, earth. And they are pure in themselves, but through Panchikaranam, we have seen all of this, through combinatorial logic, they become visible to us. Right? So the Panchikaranam provides the visibility of the basic elements. We have seen this. All right, now let's go ahead. So take any one of them. Take the sense of smell. So this is what is called Gandha Tanmatra. Gandha means the basis of smelling is called Gandha. So Gandha Tanmatra, just look at this as one of the 5, as an example. So here there is a Sattvika Tanmatra and a Tamasika Tanmatra. So each one of them, each of the Tanmatras, each of the Pancha Mahabhutas has a guna associated with it. This is all from Tattvabodha. This is why I think studying the basics is very important, because otherwise Vedanta will not become clear to you. And so what we had studied was that there are gunas associated with each one of the Tanmatras. And the gunas are Sattvika Amsha, Tamasika Amsha, and Rajasika Amsha. So the Rajasika Amsha, Rajas Amsha, is for the Karma Indriyani. But for the Jnana Indriyani, you have Sattvika Amsha and Tamasika Amsha. Alright? Okay. That being the case, let us look at the whole world of smelling. So what happens here is that the Sattvika Amsha, the Sattvic portion of the Tanmatra, becomes your sense of, your ability to smell. And the Tamasika Amsha becomes things that can be smelled. So look at this pairing that happens. The pairing that happens is Granam, which is the sense of smelling, and Prithvi, which is the container of the smells. So this one we also know that the primary guna of Prithvi, other than solidity, is the sense of smell. So the sense of smell doesn't come from Akasha. It does not belong to Vayu. It does not belong to Agni. It doesn't belong to Apaha, but it belongs to Prithvi. So whenever you smell something, that means it is a part of Prithvi. Because Prithvi is the only one that can give you smell. And same thing for the other ones, but let's just stick to this one example. So look at this. What happens is that the Gandha Tanmatra isolates the function of smelling and pairs it up between the smeller and the smelled. The smeller is the nose. You know, what happens every now and then, you see, oh my gosh, there is a dead rat. So you have to do some inference because you must have had the experience of a dead rat. A child cannot say that this is a dead rat, but the adults who have seen, who have smelled dead rats, as soon as that smell comes, that comes from the nose. So here, the nose is the smeller and the dead rat is the Vishaya, which is the object. So it's called Vishayi, Vishayin. The one who has the sense of smell means the nose, the very, not the physical nose, but the ability. It's called Gandha Vritti, the very ability. So for example, if the nose is blocked, you cannot smell it. But a functioning nose is the Vishayi, the one that is capable of doing Vishaya. So now comes another element of this. Both the Vishayi and Vishaya are not Vijatiya, they are Sajatiya. What does that mean? Vijatiya means belongs to a different family. Sajatiya means it belongs to the same family, same setup. So you see the beauty of this whole thing. So the Gandha, this is how the segmentation is done. This is how the segmentation is done. So for example, now we can extend it. Your eyes do not have the Gandha Tanmatra. See, your eyes do not have the Gandha Tanmatra. Neither does your skin, sense of touch. Neither does your rasa, taste. All of those do not have the Gandha Tanmatra. Only the nose has the Gandha Tanmatra. So the nose alone can smell its own objects. Other people that do not have the ability cannot smell. But they have their own Tanmatras. So for example, eyes have what is called Rupa Tanmatra. So Rupa Tanmatra means that they belong to the family of seeing. The seer of the eyes can only see the rupas. The skin cannot see. The nose cannot see. So you look at what happens. So the whole Shrishti, Ishvara Shrishti, is very carefully done. So each of the Indriyas, here Jnana Indriyas, and the same thing is there for the Karma Indriyas. But here we are looking at Jnana Indriyas. the sense organs, are divided into 5, and naturally each of the indriyas are responsible for their own. There's a Sanskrit word called gochara. Gochara means their field, their setup, their segmentation. So the eyes can only see forms. The nose can only smell. And so here is the thing. The Vishayi and the Vishaya must be Sajatiya, must belong to the same Gochara. You cannot cross over from one to the other. There'll be confusion. Because supposing your nose is damaged, you can employ your eyes to smell. That cannot happen. See how carefully this is all done. Everything has its own segmentation. So, in short, we can now say each of the indriyas can only be seeing the sajatiya sthula padartha. Only a Vishaya belonging to its own jati. This is the rule. This is the niyama. See, this is the rule. Now, in the next class, we will see the application of this to the Sakshi and the Vishayas of the Sakshi. But please remember this very well. In fact, before the next class, please look at these notes. And we are now going to employ the logic behind this in the Srishti. This is still a example. Actually, it's more than an example because you can see it applying to you how you see, how you smell. But now we can consolidate that into the very Sakshi itself. And we would look into that in more detail in the next class. And we will begin with that. So this is the main topic that we are now pursuing, which is the topic of advanced Vedanta. The beginning Vedanta was that the Sakshi and is different from the world. Advanced Vedanta now has a different conclusion. And we will explain that in more detail in the next class. Okay. So with that, let me close with a prayer. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. So, observation from Asha Jain. Some of us didn't know the class is online. Subhash Zero T Narayan. No, I'm not sure about that. But Asha, are you not part of, or I don't know if it is a different name, but whoever gave this, are you not part of the WhatsApp group on AVC teaching? You should be. That's where we are primarily communicating. And so send me an email, vijaykapoor@gmail.com, and I will send you the instructions on how to get on it so that you will not miss. Very good to see all of you. And I think these are really some very important topics for those of you that have had the experience of Vedanta. You might even go back for the next class to review Tattva Bodha if you want. We've already covered the basics of it, but if you want to review it on your own, please do so. Or any other introductory class like introductory text like Vedanta Sara is another one, where the tanmatras are all discussed, and the applicability of that to Sakshi we will see next week. So, and then we will connect it also to the messages of Kenopanishad, which we have already started to talk about, but we haven't concluded. So this is all related to that. So I think all this will be useful as a continuation. So that's why having looking at the notes and so on will be important. So I hope you all do that. And good to see you all. And I will... Shanti Kumar, you are also not on WhatsApp group. So I'll send you the instructions to do so. Yeah. And anybody else? All right. If there's no other questions, then I will see you next week. Hari Om.